The redistricting process is underway in North Carolina, the drawing of new legislative and congressional election maps. Dr. Andy Jackson says that process creates some dilemmas. Andy is director of the Civitas Center for Public Integrity at the John Locke Foundation. And Andy, we've already talked about one of them, that is the fact that Caldwell County is going to have to be split up, but you have identified in some John Locke Foundation research briefs others. One of them is that Fayetteville, you're either going to have to split Fayetteville or surround it. What's that all about?
Right. And these are things that are going to be happening all over the state with various kinds of districts. This particular one is a state Senate district, or I should say a pair of state Senate districts. There's a county cluster that's going to include Cumberland County, which is home to Fayetteville and most of Fort Bragg, and also Moore County, which is a little bit off to the north and west, and they're connected by this little strand of land. However, that's close enough. That's a legitimate connection. So because of their populations, they're going to be in a district together. Now, Fayetteville's kind of in the middle and to the left of Cumberland County. So the issue you're going to have is, Fayetteville being by far the largest population center there, is they can largely keep Fayetteville together, but to do so, they're going to have all of Moore County, get Fort Bragg, and then take all of the rural sections of Cumberland County and kind of hook around Fayetteville to get all of that in. So you'd have, in a certain sense, you'd have pretty clean districts as from a community of interest standpoint, because obviously Fayetteville is, one city, qualifies as a community of interest, and Moore County and the more rural parts of Cumberland County have obviously a little more rural, small town aspect to them. But you're really going to take a toll on the compactness of the district because of that whole surrounding Fayetteville thing. What you could do is basically cut Fayetteville in half and put half of it with Moore County and Fort Bragg and half of it with the rural parts of Cumberland County. But once again, you're destroying the community of interest, which is, both of these, compactness and community of interest, are things to consider, along with maintaining municipal boundaries, which kind of coincides with community interest in this case. And so you're not going to be able to satisfy all the redistricting criteria that the legislature laid out when you're drawing those two Senate districts.
So some trade-offs are involved.
Definitely.
However you go. You also point out another redistricting dilemma, and that is in Asheville. Your research brief basically says you're either going to pack or crack in Asheville. Before we talk about that, tell us what those two terms mean.
These are two of the more common methodologies for gerrymandering. These packing is where you take a whole group of like voting people or like-minded people and just jam them in together as much as possible. Cracking is the opposite, where you have a community of like-minded people and you try to divide them up between various districts to try to influence those districts. Now, cracking has two different aspects to it. One is to try to dilute the power, which is what you have sometimes, but also if you have a really strong concentration, you could crack that group and try to dominate all the surrounding districts. If people wanted to see an example of this, our brothers and sisters in Oregon just drew districts, and they cracked Portland in, I think, 4 different ways to make sure that that Portland kind of dominates those 4 congressional districts.
You say that in Asheville, you basically have a choice. You could pack or crack.
Yeah, that's the choice. And both of those, cracking Asheville and packing Asheville, were subject to lawsuits. So they were coming at it from different directions. The argument was that Asheville was cracked or split between 2 different congressional districts. That lawsuit was successful, and so Asheville is now all together in the 11th district. And the other one says that they were packed in North Carolina House districts. So they had all of Asheville basically in one district, and then the other 2 districts in Buncombe County were basically the more rural suburban areas. And so the Democrats were super concentrated in the middle of Asheville, and the other 2 districts were relatively competitive.
The point behind all of this is that redistricting is going to call for some trade-offs, and not everyone's going to be happy with the trade-offs that are made, even if there's no partisanship or gerrymandering involved.
Right. Even if you don't have partisanship, and I'm under no illusion that the Democrats and Republicans are trying to draw districts that they think, even if they're not using data, will be best for themselves. But even if you had neutral criteria being the only thing that's guiding redistricting, you're still going to have these kind of dilemmas just because you cannot successfully accomplish everything that the legislature is setting out to do.
Should people keep this in mind as they're judging the legislature's work, that there are some decisions that have to be made that are not just based on partisanship?
Certainly, and there are a lot of those, and this is what we talked about a while ago with Caldwell County and some other instances. For example, Craven County is going to be split. That's in the North Carolina House districts. That's all there is to it. It's going to happen. I'm sorry for the folks in Craven County because of that, but that's what you're going to have to face. I mean, there's a lot of these things that are basically set in stone, and a lot of these where even when you have choices, they're going to be hard choices.
Well, we know that as this process moves forward, Dr. Andy Jackson is going to be following it very closely. He is director of the Civitas Center for Public Integrity at the John Locke Foundation. You can see his redistricting dilemmas spelled out in more detail at the John Locke Foundation's website, johnlocke.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you.